Do that, we will get started. Channel. I renamed the live streams for the title, and I have like the date in the description now, so it looks a little bit better. I don't know why I didn't think to do that in the first place, but yeah, I, that's a good question, Tyler. I really do not know. Sending the Bible study to Coach Pruitt right now. Yeah, I'm actually doing it. I told him we would do it. So if he joins, he joins. Not the party. I sent him the link for the. Okay, mute your mics. Mute your mics. Mute your mics. Okay. Okay. So tonight the message of my sermon is overtake the enemy. And so we'll be reading out of 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 1 through, sorry, 1 through, 1 through, 1 through 19. So 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 1 through 19. And so it says, Now it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites, had invaded the south, and the Ziklag attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken captive the women and those who were there from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam and Jezreelites, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his son and his daughter. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, Amalekites' son, Please bring the ephod here to me. And the abbot brought the ephod to David. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered them, Pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So David went, he and his 600 men who were with him, and came to the rocks where those stayed who were left behind. But David pursued. He and 400 men for 200 men stayed behind, who were so weary that they could not cross the brook Besor. Then they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David. And they gave him bread, and he ate, and they let him drink. And they gave him a piece of cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. So when he had eaten, his strength came back to him, for he had eaten no bread nor drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him, To whom do you belong, and where are you from? And he said, I am a young man from Egypt, servant of an Amalekite. And my master left me behind, because 3 days ago I fell sick. We made an invasion of the southern area of the Chesarite in the territory which belongs to Judah, and of the southern area of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said to him, Can you take me down to this troop? So he said, Swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to the troop. And when he had brought down there, they were there, spread out all over the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoils which they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. Then David attacked them from twilight until the evening of the next day. Not a man of them escaped, except 400 men who rode on camels and fled. So David recovered all that the had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives, and nothing of theirs was lacking, either small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything, which they had taken from them. David recovered all. And I know that was pretty long, but I feel like I kind of needed to do that to kind of show you the position of where David's at. I mean, he's been running away from Saul for a very long time, and and the Philistines just rejected him because they're about to go kill Saul. So I mean, David's in this really weird place, this very interesting place. He only has 600 men, and he comes up on his village, and it's been just burned to the ground, burned to a crisp, and everything's gone. And that's what the enemy is. He that's what the enemy will do. He'll come in, he'll ransack everything, and he'll take it all, just like he did with Job. He came in and he took everything. But that's not where the story ends. And that's the problem, is the enemy he's many things. He's a liar, he's a killer, he's a destroyer, and he's a thief. And I want to today focus on him being a thief. Because we all know that he's a liar, he's a destroyer, and he's a killer, right? We talk about that a lot. He's a liar, right? He lied to Eve in the garden, right? We also know that he's a destroyer because it says that he's going to destroy everything, and he destroys it. And we know that he destroys it. He's done that many times throughout the Bible, and he's a killer, and we know that. But I think a lot of the times we forget that he's a thief, right? I think we kind of just think of him as a destroyer, and that once he comes in, it's burnt, and there's nothing we can do. We've lost everything. But that's the thing. A thief steals it, and they try to keep it for themselves. And so he's a thief, and he wants to make us forget that so that he can make us think that everything that we've worked for, everything that God's given us is just gone. But he's a liar, and he's a thief, so he's going to keep the stuff, and he's going to try to hold on to it. And and so that's just the way the enemy will work. And we forget about him so much, and we forget that this is a war, right? This is a war. This isn't just like a little game that we play. This is a war between life and death. It's a spiritual war that's going on, just like Paul talks about in Ephesians. It's a spiritual warfare. Uh, and so, how do you win a war? You don't win a war by just knowing a little bit about the enemy. No, you go into great lengths to learn about the enemy. You learn their weakness, you learn their strengths, you learn what they're going to try to do. And that's what we need to start taking it kind of seriously, is because I think we think it's this little basketball game, football game, baseball game, and I mean, we lose, we'll get him next time, but there's not a next time when it comes to this life. This is the one life you get, and you have one chance to use it. And that's the problem, is that we don't take it this seriously, and so we don't care enough to think about what our enemy's thinking. And so we have to know more. We have to know more stuff about the enemy and what he's going to try to steal. And these are just a few of the things that the enemy has stolen and what he will steal. He's stolen some of our joy. I mean, we lose all joy that we have. I mean, we get down in the dumps, but the joy of the Lord is our strength. But that's the thing, is the enemy's going to try to steal that joy, but we can't let him. He's also stolen some of our identities. I mean, look at the nation now. Our age group, their identities are lost, right? They don't know if they're a son of God, if they're a daughter of God. They think that they're a he when they're supposed to be a she when he's supposed to be he. They think they're a cat, they think they're an animal, and they've lost their identity because they're not looking at their identity through Christ. And that's what we need to be doing, is we need to be looking our identity through Christ. He's stolen our praise. He's taken all the praise that we have out of ourselves. We don't praise God anymore in the nation. Some people just think that they just come in and if they're not feeling it, then they shouldn't have to praise. But praise, we need to be praising and worshiping God as much as we can, because he deserves all of it. And so he's stolen our praise. He's stolen our peace. We don't have a peace anymore. We're so worried about what the next attack of the enemy is going to come, what he's going to do next, what part of our life is crumbling down, and he's stolen that peace that we have, even though it says that we are not given a spirit of fear, but of a love, sound mind. Sound mind meaning peaceful mind. He's also stolen our blessings. Just like he did to David, he took the blessings that was supposed to be David's blessings, his wife, his kids. He stole that. But, he's stolen it. He hasn't destroyed it sometimes. He's just stolen it. He's stolen some of our blessings. Maybe we feel like our talents aren't being used. Maybe we feel like we're worthless. We forget something. We mess up. He's stolen our blessings. What God has given to us, he's stolen what is rightfully ours. And we see that. We see the enemy has stolen stuff, and he did the same thing to David, right? I mean, he stole almost all of these, all five of these things that I listed off. He stole them at one point or another from David. And but I kind of want to focus on the blessings right now because he stole the blessings from David, but David did three things before to get back the blessings. He did three things to go back and get the blessings. And so we're going to look at the three steps David took to overtake the enemy. And so the first one is he found strength in God. Notice what it says in verse 4, right? It says, so David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. So we see how David, he has no strength. He's exhausted. He just got kicked out by the Philistines. That was kind of his home. He rebuilt his new home in Zigzag, and it's destroyed. I mean, your strength at a certain point just starts to kind of turn off. I mean, we lose strength sometimes playing a football game, playing a basketball game, but imagine David, he's lost everything, and he's wept so much that he's lost strength. And if we look at verse 2, or if we look 2 verses later, it talks about how he looks to the Lord for his strength, right? In verse 6, what does it say? It says, now David was greatly distressed, right? He's kind of distressed. He's lost his strength. For the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, right? These people turned on him, just like I've talked about before, about rebellion and about rebelling against Moses. They all turned on David. But what does it say? But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. He went to God, he looked at him, and he asked for that strength. And so that's what I think we forget sometimes. It's just like I was talking about how this is a war, right? We have to strengthen ourselves for a war. If you notice, if you ever research anything, which I'm a big person on kind of war. I kind of like researching about it, looking at it. But whenever you go out to war, usually they give them this big meal. So that they'll be strengthened, and they'll have food, and they'll be set straight for at least the next 3 days. And that's what we need to do. We need to be going to our strength. And it talks about how God's the bread of life. So if we're going into a war, we need to start feeding up on God. And so that's the thing, is that we forget that the Lord is our strength. And David does this a lot. He constantly talks about going to the Lord for his strength. In Psalms 28, verse 7, which Psalms is what David wrote. This is he wrote I think the first 100 Psalms. But he writes in Psalms 28:7, he says, the Lord is my strength and my shield. David knew where his strength came from, right? He knew that if he wanted to overtake the enemy, he would have to first refuel himself on God. He would have to strengthen himself from God. And that's by partaking in him. That's by praying with him. That's by praising him. That's by worshiping him. That's by talking to him. And that's what David did. He went to God and he strengthened himself on God. And he refilled. And so I think sometimes that before we go into a battle, we need to take a step back. Before we try to go overtake the enemy, we need to take a step back, and we need to go to God, and we need to strengthen ourselves on him. Because when we are strengthened through God, we can do so much more things. We can be so much more effective. I mean, just like what we read there. I mean, when he went to go overtake the enemy, he destroyed them, right? I mean, it said only 400, right? 400 people were left, and they had to run off. They had to run away, and It says, except 400 young men who rode on to the distance. So David came in and with his men, he defeated all of them. But why? Because he strengthened himself through the Lord and through God. And so that's the first thing that we need to do if we want to overtake our enemies, is that we need to go to the Lord for our strength, because the Lord is our strength. And so the second thing that he did is he consulted God. The next one kind of seems like a basic one, right? I mean, yeah, we need to go consult God, we need to go to Him, and we need to ask Him, talk to Him before we do anything major. And we kind of throw that off to the side because, like, I mean, who forgets to do that? But a lot of us nowadays forget to do that. I mean, we may get our strength through the Lord. We may strengthen ourselves on the Lord, on God, but then we don't consult him and we don't ask him, God, is this really what we're supposed to do? Is there a way that you want me to do this? And that's the thing, is that we need to be like David, and we also need to consult God, and we need to go to him and we need to ask him, is this what you really want me to do? And we'll get an answer and we'll be primed for success, because when we go to God and he tells us to do something, it's going to be successful, because God's not going to lead you into a battle that you're going to lose. He's going to lead you into a battle that you're going to win. And I think a lot of the problem is that we get in these situations where we get into these battles and we lose them, and then we ask, why, God, did I just lose this battle? And he said, you never asked me if you were supposed to go into this battle. Because maybe David wasn't supposed to go into this battle. Maybe he wasn't supposed to go overtake the enemy. God was going to maybe provide for him. But David didn't want to have any doubts if he should overtake them or if he should just stay back and wait. And so he consulted God in 1 Samuel chapter 37 through 8. It says, then David said to Abiathar, the priest Amalekites' son, please bring the ephod here to me. And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. And you see the word of God, he uses these big, strong words. He has these kind of pinpoints. That's what God is. I mean, he's a mighty God. And so he makes these kind of stamp, like these words. He uses these words that are like definite. You will recover all without fail. You shall surely overtake them. You shall not just overtake them, you shall surely overtake them. That means he is definitely going to, and he will recover all. And that's what God is. He's a God of absolutes. He is going to tell you if you should do something or if you shouldn't do something. And that's why we have to go to God and we have to consult him. And you may be like, well, I mean, what's this ephod, right? I mean, this ephod, he says, please bring the ephod here to me. I mean, I didn't really know what it was when I first read it. I was kind of confused. And so I did some research, and it was the holy garment that the priest wore to encounter God. And so David prepared himself. He knew that he had to get to God, so he prepared himself. I mean, I think sometimes I'm not saying that you have to get all fancied up to go to God, but you need to have your mind focused on God when you go to him. And this ephod was kind of a way of symbolizing that, God, I'm really listening to you. I don't want to listen to anything else. I'm really coming to you to ask your opinion. And I think a lot of times when we do go to try to consult God, we do it half-heartedly. We kind of barely listen, and we sometimes mix up the message. But no, David got the ephod on. He got what he was telling God. He was telling God, I'm ready to listen to you no matter what. Just I'm ready to hear it. And so God spoke to him, and God gave him that message, and he was able to immediately go for it. Sorry. Sorry. But also, like, David had full confidence going to God. But another thing that happens when we go to consult God is we can gain wisdom. Just like Solomon asked God in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 5 and then verses 9. It says, this is verse 5, says, "At Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, 'Ask, what shall I give you?'" And in verse 9, Solomon's like kind of talking, and in verse 9, he asks for it. He says, "Therefore, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to judge this great people of yours?" So just like Solomon, if we ask God for something, if it's in his name, then he will provide it. And I think we need to start asking for wisdom as a group of teenagers. I mean, we don't really have everything. We don't know everything. We don't have that wisdom. But if we go, just like Solomon, he was a young king. If we go and we consult God and we say, "God, give us wisdom so that we can do stuff in your name," he's going to provide it and he's going to help us. And just like it talks about in Second Timothy, I mean, we are not too young to follow in God's footsteps. God's calling does not have an age limit. And so we can still walk in the Lord, but we have to get that wisdom from it, and that comes by asking. And so to kind of wrap it all up, we need to consult God for two reasons, right? One reason is so that he can guide our path like David, right? So we can overtake our enemy. But also is for that wisdom and to know what and to do what's right. Because David had already asked for wisdom, because it talks about in that kind of section right there, Solomon's like, you gave my father David so much wisdom, and I want that same wisdom. He's kind of saying that in verse 9. And so David had already asked for wisdom, and with that wisdom he was able to listen in and understand what path God wanted him to take. And so the very last point I have is the last step that David took is he trusted God. This last one, I mean, it's probably the most important, I would say, out of these three steps. I mean, of course, you can't have any of these three steps without the other, but this is the one that if you're not listening to anything else, you need to listen to this one because this is the most important point. Because without this point, the other two definitely would not have mattered. Because you can find your strength in God and you can consult God, but if you don't have faith and you don't trust God, then it's useless. If David would have got strength up through God, he would have got his strength up, and he would have listened to God, and he would have been ready. But if he didn't have faith with God, if he was so built up on this strength, he had strength, and he didn't trust God that God would deliver him to his enemy, then what was it for? If David was just gonna sit home and he was just gonna twiddle his thumbs, I mean, I'm all strengthened up. I mean, I know what you want me to do, and I mean, I may go do it. I may go overtake the enemy, but I just don't think it's gonna work out, God. I don't feel like I can do this. And that's the problem, is that even myself sometimes I find myself asking God, "God, are you really sure?" I mean, before this Bible study, before we started doing this Bible study, it was a joke. I know if you were there for the first Bible study, it was kind of a joke. They were jokingly getting me to like go on there and talk about God, and I was like, "God, should I really do this?" I mean, I'd been in my word. I'd been kind of thinking about stuff, and I was thinking about doing some type of ministry. And I was like, "God, I mean, should I really do this? I mean, what if they're gonna laugh at me? What if they're gonna make fun of me?" But I remember God just kind of telling me, he was just kind of telling me to just do it and just trust in him and have faith, because he was going to make something great out of it. And I would say this is pretty good. I mean, we have what, 8 to 10 people in the Bible study each week. I mean, that's 8 to 10 people who maybe weren't getting some God in their lives, that they get to get a little bit extra God. And that's the thing, is we have to have faith. We have to have full and utter faith to trust in God, because if we do, then it's going to happen, right? But the problem is that we get strapped up, we get ready for this war like I just talked about, but we want to leave our shield of faith at home, right? I mean, we may go into the battle, yeah. Yes, God, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to go overtake the enemy. But you can go do that, but without faith, I mean, it's worthless, right? I mean, if you don't have faith that you're going to overtake and you're going to overtake the enemy and you're going to win the battle, then it's useless. Because James says it in James chapter 2, verse 26. He says, For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. And I mean, I'd heard that before, but I feel like that really just encompassed what David, I feel like that was also what David kind of thought. I mean, if he didn't have faith, then no matter what he would have done, it would have all been useless. I mean, David could have pursued the enemy. He could have overtook the enemy, but he wouldn't have got the spoils back. He could have been right there, and he could have been right there about to ready to wipe out all the enemy. And he just doesn't have the faith to do it, and he goes in there half-heartedly and he loses the battle. But David was not a man who was kind of ifs and buts. God, do you really want me to do this? He was a man of absolute. He was a man after God's own heart, it says. He said, God, if you're going to tell me to go overtake the enemy, then I have trust in you that you are going to help me succeed. And so that's what he did. He overtook the enemy, and we're preaching about him right now, and it talks about how he got it all. He got all the spoils back. He got everything that was taken from him. He got it all right back. And I think that's the problem, is that the enemy maybe would have tried to tell David that, hey, it's not really that worth it. I mean, I've destroyed it all. I mean, right, your village is burned down. I mean, everything else is burned down. I mean, look, it's not even there. But the enemy had stolen it, and the enemy was going to try to use it for its own goods. But the enemy is a liar, and he's a thief, and so we have to know that we have to go overtake the enemy once he steals something that is not his. But we first have to go to the Lord, and we have to find strength. That's the first thing we have to do. Because if we don't have strength, then we can't really do anything. Because without strength, you're kind of weak and you're hopeless, and you can't really do anything. Because your body affects your mind too. I mean, if you're kind of dead, you're down and out of it, and you're like, oh, I mean, your brain isn't going to be in the right spot. So we have to have strength through the Lord, and we also have to consult God. God, what do you really want me to do? Do you want me to go this path in my life, or you want me to go the other? Do you want me to go and talk to that person right there? You want me to go take down the enemy? And then the last one is the very last thing, and one of the most important, is we have to trust God. When God tells us to go do something, we have to say, yes, Lord, I am your servant, I will go. And we have to chase, and we have to pursue. And if we do it, then we'll come out with the riches, and we'll come out with the glory through God. But if we don't have faith, if we don't have strength, and if we don't consult God, then it's all worthless. And so just think about that. What steps are you doing to overtake your enemy tonight? And so that'll be all for tonight. Thank you for joining in. And we'll see you back here next week, I think, if I don't have anything. God bless you, and have a good rest of the week.